My name is Ava. I was never supposed to hear it. The party was winding down. One of those carefully curated post-graduation gatherings, all white wine and pastel napkins, where everyone floats around pretending they're not ranking each other's children. My mother was doing her usual performance, warm, polished, always just the right amount of humble when talking about my sister Sophie. "She's engaged now," I heard her say, voice syrupy with pride. "Such a lovely match, and Ava's taking some time off to figure things out." Time off. Like I was a faulty appliance, waiting to be repaired. Like the double major degree I'd just earned from Berkeley didn't count because I hadn't gift-wrapped it in a fiancé or a job at Goldman Sachs. The words sliced clean through me, sharper than I expected. I stepped back from the patio doorway, retreating behind a wall of blooming hydrangeas and paper lanterns. Taking time off. That was how she explained my absence in the graduation slideshow. That's why I wasn't there. In the photo montage, in the congratulations, in the narrative they'd prepared for the neighbors, I wasn't even a footnote. I'd felt it before, of course, in 1,000 small ways. The way my mother's gaze skipped past me at dinner, the way Dad introduced me as the smart one but intense, the way Sophie's mediocre triumphs were paraded like medals, while mine gathered dust on forgotten shelves. But this was the first time they'd rewritten me entirely. I stood frozen by the garden archway, hands trembling slightly around the stem of my untouched glass. Inside, the slideshow played on. Laughter spilled out the French doors like perfume. A photo of Sophie in a cap and gown, her arms thrown around our parents. My seat at the ceremony had been near the back, my name mispronounced as I crossed the stage. I remember catching my mother's eye from a distance, her smile already aimed at the camera, not at me. Betrayal burns differently when it's subtle. It doesn't scream, it simmers. Low, quiet, and deep, like a fever you try to ignore until you're drenched in it. I set my glass down on the edge of a planter, careful not to make a sound. My heels sank slightly into the soft grass as I walked away from the celebration. No one noticed. I thought about saying something, about storming back into that room and demanding to know why my face had been erased from the video. But I knew how that would go. "You're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal. Sophie didn't mean to leave you out." They would tell me to calm down while clutching glasses of wine they didn't pay for, surrounded by people who believed them to be wonderful parents. My rage would be repackaged as drama, my absence reframed as self-sabotage. I walked to the edge of the yard, where the fairy lights faded and the lawn met the dark. I checked my phone. No new messages. No congratulations. Not even from Sophie. What does it mean when your own family rewrites you out of your own life? That night, back in my apartment, I opened the graduation video on my school's shared drive. I watched it twice, scanned every minute. Not a single frame of me. Not in the department photos. Not in the lab group shot. Not even the casual campus clips they used to pad the transitions. It was almost impressive how thoroughly they'd scrubbed me from the narrative. Almost. I stared at my own reflection in the black mirror of the laptop screen. My gown still hung on the back of the door, the tassel limp, unused. They didn't even ask what I wanted to do next. No questions about my thesis, the fellowship I nearly secured, the startup job I turned down because Sophie's wedding might require more of your presence. I should have felt broken, but I didn't. I felt clear. It wasn't that they forgot me, it wasn't an oversight. They wanted a version of the family that didn't include me. Not as I am, only as they could control. And if they couldn't control me, they'd make me disappear. Let them. They wanted to erase me? Fine. Let's see how they handle it, when the one they erased becomes the only one who can save them. Next time, when someone asks why Ava wasn't in the photo, maybe they'll remember who kept the lights on behind the scenes. And maybe next time, they'll think twice before writing me out. I didn't slam the door. That would have given them something to talk about. No, I let it click shut behind me, soft as a sigh, like I was just passing through, like I didn't notice what they'd done. But I did. The smell hit me first. Lemon polish and lavender candles, the kind my mother only lit when company was coming. My keys barely had time to settle in the bowl before one saw it. The bookshelf, or rather, what had replaced it. Where my old science fair trophies and debate medals used to stand, each one carefully arranged by year, each a little silent testament to the hours I spent earning their approval, there were now framed engagement photos of Sophie and Ethan. Sophie on a swing, barefoot in a wheat field, laughing like a perfume ad. Sophie, at sunset, in a white dress and perfect hair, perched on the back of his bicycle like a scene out of a romantic comedy no one asked for. My shelf, my memories, gone. I stood there for a moment, unsure where to look. The hallway that used to have my childhood drawings taped up had been freshly painted, blush beige, neutral, like a hotel. Like no one had ever lived here. I walked into my old room. They hadn't turned it into a yoga studio or a craft space. That might have at least implied some effort. Instead, they'd simply cleared it. All my books boxed and stacked neatly in the corner, as if I were just another piece of clutter waiting to be donated. On the desk, a sticky note in my mother's handwriting. Ava, saved what seemed important. Let us know what to toss. Let us know what to toss. I opened one of the boxes, half hoping for a mistake. Maybe she'd kept the journals I filled cover to cover in high school, the robotics competition badges, my old copy of A Brief History of Time with the spine held together by duct tape. But no, this box had my 8th grade attendance certificate and a broken plastic picture frame with no photo inside. The things that were important were the scraps they didn't know how to categorize. The rest vanished. I turned to the closet, opened it slowly. Half the space had already been claimed. Sophie's monogrammed bridesmaid robes hanging in a tidy row, next to 3 identical ivory suitcases. So that's why they asked if I was staying long. This wasn't my room anymore. It was a bridal prep station. I picked up one of the robes, pale pink satin. Embroidered script across the back, Mrs. Sophie Bennett to be. The tags were still on. I didn't cry, not when I found the empty space where my soccer cleats used to live, or the dusty corner where my telescope once sat, not even when I realized they'd taken down the cork board of newspaper clippings that documented every time I'd been featured for academic awards or STEM outreach. I didn't cry. I just folded the robe and put it back on the hanger. Downstairs, voices drifted from the kitchen. My parents laughing with Sophie, probably sipping white wine and planning canapes. The sound of ice clinking in glasses. Domestic, intimate, as if nothing had happened. As if I were just visiting, just passing through. I stood in the hallway, listening, waiting for someone to notice I was there. They didn't. My hand hovered over the doorknob again. For a split second, I thought about walking into that kitchen and asking, no, demanding, why they'd erased me from the wall, from the slideshow, from this entire house. But what would they say? That's not true, sweetheart. You're being dramatic. Sophie's just going through a big moment right now. You had your turn. I turned the knob. The air outside was sharp and cool, brushing against my cheeks like a reminder. I didn't belong here anymore. I didn't leave a note. I didn't take anything. I walked out with the same silence I'd been trained to perfect since I was 12. It wasn't a tantrum, it was an exit. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to beg for a seat at the table, it's to walk away before they pretend you were never there. They want to forget me? Let them. But they don't get to forget what I've built. And soon, they'll remember, because they'll have no choice. It started with a mistake. A plain white envelope wedged between 2 credit card offers, addressed in blocky font to Ava Morgan, forwarded from my old campus mailbox. I almost didn't open it. It looked like junk. No handwritten address, no university logo, just that vague line in the corner. Account services. I opened it with the disinterest of someone expecting nothing important. Just a habitual flick of the wrist with the letter opener I kept on my desk, because some part of me still clung to the ceremony of things. But the second I saw my parents' address printed on the inside form, my stomach dropped. Past due, mortgage payment delinquent, $3,147.89. It didn't make sense. I blinked, reread it, checked the return address again. Then I noticed the top right corner. Duplicate copy, sent to financial cosigner. That was me. I felt the room tilt slightly, like my body already understood what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. They were behind on the house. Our house. Except it wasn't just our house anymore. It was their curated showcase for Sophie's upcoming wedding. The one they were throwing like royalty. The one with gold leaf invitations and monogrammed menu cards. The house where my awards were now in boxes in the attic. If they hadn't been tossed already, they were behind on the payments. And they hadn't told me. I stared at the letter, reread the number, ran the math in my head automatically. I'd been sending quiet support since grad school. Small deposits here and there, enough to keep the utilities smooth, just so I didn't have to hear my mother sigh about how hard things are now that Ava insists on living on her own. Never enough for them to notice, but just enough to stop the cracks from becoming canyons. But this wasn't small, and more importantly, they'd never told me. No call, no text, no mention of trouble. They'd pretended I was irrelevant, but used my name to co-sign the loan 5 years ago, right after Dad's second layoff, when my biotech internship turned full-time and they finally admitted they needed help. Just once, they said. Just a formality. Now I knew why that one-time ask had quietly multiplied, why they always acted like my stability was a given, like I was their insurance policy. Not a person, not a daughter, just a silent backup plan. I sat back in my chair and let the letter fall to my lap. A soft rustle, like a whisper. They didn't want me at the graduation, didn't want me in the house, but they needed me in the paperwork. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The slideshow omission, the photo replacement, the careful distancing. They were staging something, a presentation of perfection for the community, for Sophie's fiancé's family, for the neighbors and the club. A vision of domestic elegance, mother, father, glowing bride-to-be. No room for the scientist daughter in flats, who made them uncomfortable with her unfiltered opinions and her inconvenient truths. But when it came to the roof over their heads, my name was right there in ink. I pulled up my banking app, scrolled through the auto-pay history. It was all still set. Utilities, HOA fees, a landscaping bill they never acknowledged. I'd been helping them quietly for years, and they'd pretended I didn't exist. I felt something rise in me, not rage, not sadness, something colder, sharper, a quiet switch flipping inside my chest. This was the moment it all changed. I wasn't going to storm into their house, screaming. That wasn't how this version of me operated. No, I was going to let the silence speak. Let them feel what it's like to need something from someone they've erased. I reached for my laptop, clicked into each recurring payment. Cancel, cancel, cancel. One by one, I turned off the lifelines they never thanked me for. Because if they wanted a curated version of the family, one that excluded me, then they could try surviving without me too. Let them sit in that house, flipping switches that suddenly don't work. Let them call the bank and hear about late fees. Let them wonder why the lights won't turn on and the water's cold. And when they look around for someone to blame, let the silence answer back. You wanted invisible? Now you'll see what that really looks like. The first message came on a Thursday. Just 4 words. No greeting, no signature. Ava, the power's out. I stared at the screen, watching the 3 blinking dots appear, then disappear, then nothing. It was my mother's number. For a moment, I felt that old reflex kick in. The part of me trained to respond, to fix, to smooth over the cracks, before anyone outside the family noticed they existed. I could already hear her voice in my head, brittle and breathless. It must be a mistake, sweetheart. Could you just take care of it? But I didn't move. I didn't reply. The second message came 2 hours later. Please fix it. Still no. Hi, no, how are you? No explanation for the years of emotional exile, just an expectation. The assumption that I'd rush in, quiet and invisible, just like always. I let it sit unread. In that silence, it felt like oxygen, like standing on solid ground after years of treading water. They didn't reach out again, not for 3 days. Then Sophie called. Her name lit up my phone like a siren. I let it ring twice before I answered, more curious than anything. I hadn't heard her voice since graduation day, unless you count that brief, painful moment when she pretended not to see me walk by. "Hey, Avie," she chirped, fake sweet. "I've been meaning to check in." I nearly laughed. "Check in?" She ignored the tone. "Yeah, just wanted to see how things were going. Heard you've been super busy. Anyway, Mom said the power went out at home. Crazy, right?" Silence on my end. "Sophie," I said, calm and clipped, "did you know I wasn't in the graduation slideshow?" She hesitated. "That was complicated," she finally said. "It just wasn't the right moment for your intensity." My intensity. Like the sum total of my life could be reduced to an adjective that made people uncomfortable at parties. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just hung up. And I blocked her number. That night, I sat in my apartment with a cup of green tea, watching the city lights flicker through my window. I thought about every time they'd asked me to tone it down, to not correct someone at dinner, to not make a scene when my ideas were stolen in group projects, to not act too proud when I won awards, to shrink. But what they called intensity was just light that didn't fit into their tiny frame. So I gave myself a new frame. 3 weeks later, I stood in the atrium of my company headquarters, glass, steel, and sunlight. I wore a black tailored dress, soft wool, sharp shoulders. Not for vanity, for armor. The podium gleamed under the lights. Behind me, a banner read, "Women Who Build, Investing in the Future of STEM." I adjusted the mic and smiled. "I'm honored to announce the Ellery Foundation's latest initiative," I began. "We're allocating $1, $2 million in seed funding for underrepresented women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics." Applause. Cameras clicked. I saw a few old professors in the crowd, some mentors. My team beamed beside me. I paused, then added, "This grant exists because too many brilliant women are asked to wait their turn, to shrink, to be quiet." I know that story personally, which is why I'm putting my name on this. I let it land. Ava Morgan, PhD, on every press release, every banner, every post. By evening, the story was trending locally. Journalists shared it. University alumni tagged it. LinkedIn was on fire. And back in that house where I was boxed away like an old keepsake, the phone started ringing. "Congratulations. Recognition. You must be so proud of your daughter." Suddenly, the daughter they'd erased was the one everyone wanted to know. And the silence I'd left behind? It started to feel like thunder. The first time the phone rang, I didn't recognize the number, but I knew it was her. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. Just once. "Ava," my mother began, her voice sticky with practiced warmth. "I've been thinking maybe we could reconnect. Everyone's been talking about the donation. The community is so proud of you." Proud. That word hit like a rock, skipping across water. Too light to sink, too quick to feel real. I sat still for a long moment, the phone resting against my knee. The city outside my window carried on without me. Cars rushing below, a delivery truck backing up, laughter from a bar on the corner. And there I was, perched above it all, listening to a woman who had boxed up my childhood, asking to reel me back in, now that my name meant something. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't call back right away. I waited 3 days, then I answered. She picked up on the second ring. "Ava, I was just proud of someone you didn't include on stage?" I asked, my tone flat. "Tell me, Mom, were you proud when I got that STEM scholarship sophomore year? Or when I got published in Cell Biology Today last spring? Proud when you replaced my shelf with Sophie's engagement photos?" There was a pause, long enough to reveal the truth behind her silence. "Well," she started, and I could hear the air rearranging around her, preparing for a pivot. We didn't know you wanted to be included. You didn't ask. Ava, honey, we were trying to give Sophie her moment. She's delicate. You're always so independent. I almost laughed. That word again. Independent. Their favorite excuse. Their most flattering insult. No, I said slowly. I was just easy to ignore. Her voice dropped an octave. This isn't easy for us either. Us. It had always been them on one side, me on the other. I didn't respond. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. She tried again. Maybe we could plan a dinner? Just the family. No pressure. The community's really paying attention right now. It might be nice. For everyone. There it was. The truth slipped right through that crack in her tone. She didn't want me back. She wanted proximity to my success. She wanted me smiling in the background of her redemption arc. The forgiven daughter. The mended bond. An image to parade at the country club. But this time, I wasn't stepping into her frame. Later that week, my father showed up at my office. No appointment. Just his name scrawled on the visitor log in his firm. Blocky handwriting. The receptionist looked up at me, her eyebrows raised. He says it's urgent. I should have sent him away. Instead, I buzzed him in. He walked in with the confident pace of a man who had always been listened to. His suit was pressed. His tie was too loud. He sat without asking. The house needs repairs, he said, like we were discussing the weather. Sophie's wedding is coming up fast. It's just a small ask. A small ask. Just a bit of insulation. A new roof. A rehearsal dinner catered by someone featured on cable television. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was the man who once told me I'd make a great teacher, because girls in biotech were pushing it. The man who said I was too intense for certain guests. The man who turned his face away at my graduation, like he'd already forgotten how hard I'd fought to walk that stage. You once said, I replied, that if I insisted on being part of the family, I shouldn't call you my father. He blinked. So, I continued, let's respect that. He stood abruptly. You're twisting things. I leaned back in my chair, calm. No, I'm quoting. He didn't argue. Not really. He just walked out, his silence heavier than the request he came in with. Back at my desk, I looked out at the skyline and smiled. They wanted the daughter they boxed up to come home and clean up their mess. But I wasn't coming back. Not unless the terms changed. Not a grand apology. Not a family-wide reckoning. Just a quiet, awkward invitation slipped into a message from Sophie, this time from a new number. A carefully worded text that felt more like a contract than an olive branch. We've been talking. Maybe we could bring you back into things, privately. No drama. Just family. Just family. As if those two words had ever protected me. As if I hadn't spent years being erased inside that so-called unit. Every achievement minimized. Every emotion misread. They didn't say sorry. They didn't acknowledge the slideshow. They didn't mention the bills in my name. What they offered wasn't belonging. It was a seat at their table, with my mouth shut and my hands open. A seat where I'd be allowed back, as long as I didn't ask for acknowledgement. But I wasn't that girl anymore. So I drafted my response with the precision I'd learned from years of pitching biotech investors. I'm open to re-engagement, but not quietly. These are my terms. Sophie assumes full financial responsibility for the house. Public acknowledgement of my erasure at graduation. Repayment of $16,000 in quiet financial support over the last 5 years. I paused before sending it. Not because I doubted my worth, but because I could already picture their faces. My father's mouth tightening. My mother's wide, betrayed eyes. Sophie's silence curling into something smug, like always. But this time, I didn't flinch. I hit send. The phone stayed quiet. For days. No rebuttal. No negotiation. Just pure, uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence you hear when someone realizes they're not in control anymore. I didn't chase them. I didn't follow up. I had said my piece. The rest was theirs to carry. Let them sit in that house, still powered on now, but only because I'd allowed it. Let them feel the weight of every penny I once provided without thanks. Let them scroll through the congratulatory messages and wonder how many more might have come if they'd treated me as more than a backup plan. And when they finally answered, When the post went up, it wouldn't be a triumph. It would be proof. They'd say what needed to be said, but only because I made it the cost of keeping their precious illusion intact. They wanted me back, but I was done being the quiet one. It appeared on a sleepy Tuesday morning. A Facebook post from my mother's account, shared just after 7 a.m., before most of her world had even had their coffee. No tags, no photos. Just black text on a pale background, the way people post birthdays or obituaries, or vague updates they don't want questioned too closely. We apologize for failing to celebrate both our daughters equally. We are proud of Ava and Sophie, and we regret the moments when our actions didn't reflect that. It sat there, quietly pulsing in my feed. No fanfare, no call, no email. Just a public gesture that ticked the box. Clean, vague, safe. By noon, the comments had rolled in. Beautifully said. So gracious of you to post this. Family first. Always. It was almost laughable. They thought this would be enough. That this polite, sanitized post would erase a decade of dismissal, of rooms where my name was spoken like an afterthought, if at all. They hadn't mentioned the slideshow, the boxes of my childhood, the mortgage, the years of invisibility, just moments. Like it was all one single oversight, not a pattern engraved into every corner of our family dynamic. Still, there it was, a public record, a reluctant confession. They knew what they'd done, and, more importantly, they knew I was done waiting for them to say it. The next day, I got a message from Sophie, just a single sentence. "We hope this is enough." I read it twice. The phrasing wasn't accidental. This, not we, not I, not even a shred of direct accountability. Just the hope that this generic apology would be enough to earn back my silence, my presence, my usefulness. They didn't want a reckoning. They wanted a reset. But this time, I wasn't folding myself into their comfort. This time, I held the leverage. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but out of clarity. They had never needed me to be successful. They had needed me to be silent. And now I had taught them what my absence really cost. Their image, their narrative, their control. So let them post. Let the neighbors nod. Let the comments flood in with praise about grace and motherhood and family ties. I had already rewritten the story, and next time, I'd be the one holding the mic. The panel was live, cameras rolling, spotlights warm against my collarbones. I sat center stage, a name card in front of me that read exactly as I asked. Dr. Ava L. Morgan, Director, Applied Biotech, and Founder, Ellery Foundation. Not Sophie's sister. Not the intense one. Not invisible. The moderator's question was simple, but it cracked something open. How do you deal with betrayal in high-stakes environments, especially when it comes from people close to you? There was a beat of silence. The panelists glanced around. Polite, thoughtful. One leaned forward to speak, but I didn't wait. I looked straight into the camera, and I said, "You stop making yourself small to fit someone else's frame. You become the one who writes the caption." A hush swept across the auditorium, just for a moment. Then the room erupted. Laughter, cheers, applause rippling through the rows like a tidal wave. I didn't flinch. I let it settle, slow and real, until it reached the very last row. Because this time, the story wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It wasn't boxed away or edited out. It was owned by me. When the applause died down, I added, quieter now, but clearer than ever. Sometimes betrayal doesn't sound like a slap. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Like your name being skipped. Like watching someone else take credit for your work, your worth, your space. But once you stop shrinking, once you take up your full shape, there's no going back. And there shouldn't be. Someone in the third row wiped their eyes. I saw a girl, maybe 20, clutching a notebook to her chest like a shield. Her face shone with something I knew too well. Recognition. that quiet ache of not being seen, until someone on a stage names it. When the panel ended, they lined up to speak with me, not because of my title, but because of my truth. And somewhere, I imagined my parents watching that live stream, because I knew they were. I pictured my mother shifting in her seat, my father adjusting his collar, Sophie maybe trying to smile, like it didn't sting. But they heard me, every word, and this time, they didn't get to interrupt. I walked off stage with a full heart and a steady spine. No more shrinking, no more silent approval purchased with obedience. I had earned every syllable of my story, and now I was telling it myself. After the panel, I didn't rush out. I let myself linger backstage, exhaling the adrenaline slowly, like steam off a simmering pot. A few handshakes, a hug from the organizer, someone from a local women's leadership group asking if I'd keynote their fall conference. I said I'd think about it, but my mind was already elsewhere. On the way back to my hotel, I scrolled through my mentions, tweets, tags, clips of my answer going viral, shared with captions like, "This is what power sounds like. Stop shrinking, start owning." Ava Ellery said what so many of us needed to hear. I should have felt proud, and I did. But pride wasn't the loudest thing inside me. It was peace, that quiet, grounded kind. The kind that shows up not when you win, but when you stop performing for people who never intended to clap. My inbox overflowed with speaking requests and media inquiries. But buried between them, like a stone at the bottom of a lake, was an email from Sophie. Subject line, "You really meant it, didn't you?" I didn't open it. I already knew what it said. Or rather, what it tried not to say. Regret, maybe. Or shame. Or that slippery thing people send your way when they realize the version of you they dismissed has grown into someone they can no longer ignore or manage. Later that night, I sat on the hotel balcony, fingers tracing the rim of a wine glass. The city pulsed below me, alive in a way my childhood home never was. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I used back in grad school when ideas used to come in bursts at 2 a.m. Between the lab notes and margin doodles were my oldest dreams. Mentorship programs, accessible biotech education, scholarships for first-gen girls who never got called on in class. Dreams I'd put off, or worse, offered up to my family in little pieces, hoping they'd finally say, "We see you." They never did. And now, I didn't need them to. I flipped to a clean page. Project, reclamation. Not just of space or narrative, of self. The next morning, I made a decision. Not out of vengeance, but vision. I called my company's CFO. "It's time to rename the initiative," I told her. "No more generic branding. Put my name on it." "You're sure?" she asked. "That'll make waves." "I'm counting on it." And we did. The Ava Ellery Fellowship for Women in Applied Science launched 2 weeks later. Full scholarships, living stipends, a built-in mentorship network. Every recipient received a welcome letter, personally signed by me, that ended with, "You are not too much. You are not too loud. The world needs your exact voice. Let them hear it." Applications flooded in, my inbox filled with stories. Girls who had been talked over, laughed at, underestimated. Some with parents like mine, some with none at all. And one night, as I finished reviewing the final round of applicants, I got a letter, handwritten, cream-colored stationery, from my mother. The handwriting wobbled at the edges. "Dear Ava," it began, "we watched the panel. Your father didn't say a word for an hour after. I've started to wonder how many times we asked you to be less, when, really, we should have just been more." I paused. "We still don't know how to talk about what we did, but we're trying. I know we don't deserve forgiveness yet, maybe not ever, but thank you for not letting us silence you, even when we tried." It wasn't an apology, not quite. Not in the way I once begged for, but for the first time. It wasn't about how I made them feel. It was about what they did. That letter sits in a drawer now, not displayed, but kept. Not because it changed everything, but because it marked something I never thought I'd see. A crack in the wall. And sometimes that's enough. The rest? I've already built myself a new foundation. Have you ever been written out of a story that should have belonged to you? What would you do if the people who erased you were suddenly forced to acknowledge the power of your name? If this story spoke to something deep in you, something unspoken, don't keep it quiet. Hit the like button, drop a comment below, and share your own moment of reclamation. Let's build a space where no woman has to shrink just to keep the peace. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, "I was always here."